Stan went on to live, well, in more than one place before he went to America. And here to tell us a bit more about where he went after Ulverston is Danny Lawrence. Now, Danny is the author of a great book called The Making of Stan Laurel, Echoes of a British Boyhood. And you can find that online. We're going to find out more about that when we speak to Danny. Danny, are you there?
I am indeed, Ross. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us on this very special show on Stan's birthday.
It's a great job that you're doing, Ross.
So it's always a pleasure, Danny. Now, we spoke to Mark about Stan's time in Ulverston. What can you tell us? Because your book tells us some of the places Stan lived, and one of them in particular often gets missed out, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, the important thing really is that once he was living in Ulverston, important though that stage was in his life, the Jeffersons weren't living as a family, and they didn't live together as a family until something like the summer of 1895 when they moved to North Shields. His parents had been living in Bishop Auckland. Stan had been living with his grandparents in Ulverston. But from 1895 on, for the next 10 years, they were a family, a close family living in North Shields in the northeast of England. And it was during that time, of course, a very formative period where Stan was 5 when he went there, 15 when he left. And it was during those formative years where his father was running a small theatrical empire up there. Stan developed his passion for the theatre, all things theatrical, and was determined that he was going to spend the rest of his life making people laugh. And what I try to argue in the book is that if you look carefully at the Laurel and Hardy films, which he was so influential in creating, you can see echoes of his British boyhood.
Give us some examples of those, Danny.
Well, I think they fall into 3 categories, if I might do that. I think there are situations in the films which come from his boyhood. There are personal experiences which are echoed in the films. And some of the films are, in fact, remakes of things that he was familiar with as a boy. I mean, the most obvious thing in the case of situations are those stairs which ran down from his home in North Shields down to the Fish Quay about 70 feet below. And those stairs are almost an exact replica of the stairs used in the music box. That's the point that A.J. Marriott spotted some years ago, and he was absolutely right to point to that very, very important parallel. But it's not just that, because North Shields is a fishing port, and for those who know their Laurel and Hardy films, you know how often you get references to fish and to fishing, to ports, to ships, to boats, and to sailors. And all of these are a reflection of the kind of situations that Stan was absolutely familiar with as a boy. But in addition, in the films, I think you get echoes of his personal experiences. It's not a coincidence that the kind of tie that he wears is a replica of the kind of tie that his rather elegant father used to wear, except in Stan's case it's anything but elegant. In Bratz, you find the 2 boys wearing the same kind of clothes that Stan wore as a boy, and even in Chump at Oxford, that was made in 1940, you have Stan and Oliver turning up at Oxford, wearing the clothes that they would normally wear at Eton College, the clothes that Stan had been obliged to wear as a boy and which he'd hated. And it's quite interesting that when they laugh at him, or laugh at them for wearing those inappropriate clothes, Oliver turns to Stan and he said, "You made me wear these." And I think that's probably exactly right. You get references to suit based on an experience Stan had. And Stan tells us that he got into lots of scraps when he was a boy. On one occasion, for example, he got drunk, drinking what he claimed he thought was water. And, of course, you get that exactly the same theme in the film Scram, and then again in Them Thar Hills. And if I could just finish off with one little example, the remakes. Home from the Honeymoon was written by his father, and that turns up again as Duck Soup, one of the early Laurel and Hardy films. Babes in Toyland in many ways has elements from the juvenile panto company that Stan was in when he was 16. And of course, Bohemian Girl is based on the operetta, which Stan was very familiar with as a boy. I mean, his father put it on at least 3 times that I know of in North Shields. So in instance after instance, and I could go on for longer, it seems to me that in those films, Stan was not necessarily consciously, perhaps unconsciously, but introducing things that were echoes of his formative years as a boy in Britain.
And you mentioned Duck Soup. Of course, that went on to become Another Fine Mess, didn't it?
Yes, that's right. But based on a small sketch, his father wrote melodramas, but when they became less popular, he switched to sketches, and Home from the Honeymoon was quite a popular sketch. It toured the music halls in Britain, and it was obviously even credited to Arthur himself. Arthur didn't like quite what they did with it, but nonetheless, it obviously was something that Stan had remembered and decided to exploit in a different medium.
Now, can we be more specific about some of the places Stan lived before he went to Glasgow, for instance? So from leaving Ulverston, where did he go from there?
Well, there are some people who've suggested that he spent time in Bishop Auckland. I've worked pretty hard to try to find evidence of that, and I'm sure he visited Bishop Auckland, where his parents lived from time to time. We know, for example, he went there when his sister Beatrice was baptized. But there's no hard evidence that I've come across that he actually lived in Bishop Auckland or that the Jeffersons lived there as a family. I've checked this with local historians and the people from the Tony Hillman, for example, who is the Grand Sheikh of the tent in Bishop Auckland, and they would agree with that. So the crucial thing really is that move from Ulverston to the northeast of England to North Shields. But then, critically, the family moved in 1905 to Glasgow. And as I think everybody knows, it was on the stage of the Pantechnicon that Stan made that very, very famous appearance that his father witnessed accidentally, but that launched Stan to his into his actual stage career. Yes,
and of course the Glasgow branch of the Sons of the Desert have their meetings there. Willie McIntyre has his meetings in the Panopticon in Glasgow. So if you're ever in the area in Glasgow, folks, go and you can check it up online and go and watch a Laurel and Hardy film in the very theatre where Stan made his debut performance as a boy. That's in Glasgow on the Trongate in Argyle Street. And have you been there? Have you been there yourself, Danny? Have you been up to the?
I have, but at the time I didn't realise what its significance was.
Oh, you must come anytime you're back in
I
Scotland.
I was young and innocent at the time.
Now, anytime you're up, let me know, and we'll definitely take you around there and take you to see it, because it really is something to be seen. Now, I want to talk more about your book. Where can people get your book, The Making of Stan Laurel: Echoes of a British Boyhood? Where can they get it?
Well, the most obvious and easiest way to get it, I suppose, is via Amazon. But if you're living in the UK and you'd like to get a copy more cheaply, and a signed copy, if you'd like one, the obvious place to get it from is directly from me, because I can undercut Amazon quite considerably.
Okay.
So to do that, if you were to just contact me via my email address, which is the making of Stan Laurel at virginmedia.com. The making of Stan Laurel at virginmedia.com.
Brilliant.
And I can put a copy in the post to you without difficulty and save you a lot of money at the same time.
Well, that's good, and it's I think it's always great to get these new books. I mean, it's been out for a wee while now, but it's always great to have new books giving us new information. And I highly recommend your book. I think it's fantastic. It's a great coffee table book. And is there going to be a follow-up? Are you going to be doing anything else?
There is a follow-up, and it's almost finished. It's not specifically about Stan. It's about Arthur Jefferson, his father, who deserves a book in his own right.
Absolutely.
But it not only tells the story of Arthur, but amongst it, of course, it tells the story further of Stan and his siblings, Beatrice and Gordon, and even Edward, who were all involved in different ways in the theatrical business. Wow. Hopefully, by this time next year, you can interview me again about that book.
Absolutely, of course we shall. We'll do it again on Stan's birthday every year. Now, just when you mentioned that about Stan's father, didn't Stan's father keep a diary of sorts of what Stan was doing?
Yes, well, I'm not so sure you would call it as a diary, but he certainly wrote a book which Stan refused to have published. He didn't like it, but there are extracts of it which John McCabe got his hands on, and they describe a very famous incident in which Stan persuaded his father to build a little theatre in the attic of their second house in North Shields. Stan used to put on performances there.
Yes.
But the final performance, Stan wrote it, and Stan directed it and produced it, and he also starred in it. And he cast it too, and he cast the butcher's boy because he thought that his facial features fitted the part very well. Well, Stan and Harold got involved in a scrap, theatrical scrap, but it turned out to be more of the real thing. They rolled over on the stage, knocked over one of the paraffin lamps that was serving as footlights, set the curtains alight, and had Arthur not been quickly to hand with a fire extinguisher, it could have been a pretty disastrous situation. But as a result of it, poor Stan lost the use of his theatre for good.
Oh. Now, wasn't there... I'm laughing because, like I said, it's just... I'm just visualising it happening and seeing it from a slapstick point of view. But wasn't there... What was the follow-up to that story? I'm sure they wrote to each other...
Oh, yes, they did, yes. I mean, Stan used to require payment from participants, but he didn't necessarily insist on coin of the realm. He would take anything that he thought might be useful to him, and all Harold had to offer was some white mice. And Stan took the white mice. After the event, Harold demanded his white mice back because he lost his eyebrows in the conflagration, and he wasn't at all happy. And there was almost one of those tit for tats that was so characteristic of the Laurel and Hardy films. But his father intervened and made sure that Stan wrote a more diplomatic letter back again. Stan refused to return the white mice, but he compromised. And he said that if they have children, if they get married, and if they have children, I'll share the babies with you. But unfortunately, his father's account doesn't tell us whether or not that actually happened or not.
And how old were they at this time, Danny?
Well, his father actually, I think, gets this wrong. His father was very old when he wrote the account. His father said it's reported in John McKay's book that Stan was about 9 at the time, but in fact Stan was 12 at the time.
That's so funny.
But it's a good story, and it would have made a good Laurel and Hardy film.
That is one of my favourite stories from Stan's childhood. That about the story of him and the butcher boy. And well, listen, Danny, thank you so much for taking the time out to call us up, because I really did want to get your take on this and be part of the show. Keep in touch regarding your next book, and we'll definitely get you back on again to talk about that.
It's been a pleasure as always, Ross.